This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. Well, today we have a lot to discuss. Tucker Carlson last night, he issued the first installment of the transparency of the January 6th videos. And so a lot of what came out in those videos had not previously been seen by the full public. And specifically, the so-called QAnon shaman video showed that he was actually escorted throughout basically the entire U.S. Capitol by police. So does that change the nature of his plea agreement? The question that I have is whether his defense attorneys had access to those videos. There is a very big difference between transparency in terms of public interest. I think that is a huge issue. And of course, all of the video footage should have been released to the public long before Speaker McCarthy came along and actually gave this to Tucker Carlson. I think that's a great idea. We need to know the truth. We've had some suspicions, but we all need to know the truth about what happened. But even more importantly, the defense attorneys who are representing individual clients and defendants of January 6th prosecutions have to be able to access all of the footage related to their cases. So were there so-called Brady violations? The standard, of course, is the Supreme Court case in 1963 called Brady versus Maryland. That case stands for the proposition that anything that is in the government's possession that is exculpatory or tends even to exonerate the defendant of the crime for which he or she is accused has to be given over to the defense. Of course, this makes sense in a fundamental fairness and due process protection context, because when the government withholds any information from defense attorneys, then you can see how prosecutions can be railroaded. So I'm going to talk about that more and what we've learned from some of the filings from the DOJ, as well as defense attorneys in the context of an interesting separation of powers argument. So my good friend Ron Coleman, who is an excellent attorney, is going to join me right after this to talk about more. So joining me now is Ron Coleman, who is a partner at the Dillon Law Group. And Ron, I want to get to the January 6th videos and Tucker's whole segment last night. And, you know, there has been a lot of Twitter commentary over this. I think a lot of questions that are frankly really irrelevant to the legal questions here. So just off the top, what was your general overall assessment of what Tucker said and what these new evidence videos reveal?
The release of the videos only confirms what everyone assumed was the fact when they refused to release them in the first place. Anytime someone doesn't want to show you something, you may safely assume that it is not to his benefit to show it to you. This is an outrageous constitutional, ethical, and moral violation. And what's amazing to me is how they have played the reaction as if they're the offended ones. It never ends.
Yeah, and Chuck Schumer actually went to the Senate floor today to disparage and try to discredit Tucker. But the Department of Justice here is saying, well, this is up to Congress. And because they're a separate branch of government, we can't compel Congress to turn this over. So sorry, we're just going to go ahead and be limited to what we can provide the defense based on what's in our possession. Isn't that kind of an incentive then for the government as a whole to simply say, well, Congress can keep this, don't give it to us so that we don't have to turn it over?
It is, but I'll do you one better. It's not only provides all the wrong incentives, and of course apply to the government, not to a single branch of government. So the argument would not be that the Justice Department or that even that prosecutors, all constitutional amendments violated our rights, but rather that the United States, which is, after all, the entity on behalf of which prosecutors style themselves as bringing charges and prosecuting cases, the United States of America is responsible for the Brady violation. But there's also another point here, which is that the separation of powers issue is Congress is not in the law enforcement business. Congress has oversight responsibility with respect to everything the government does. Once the January 6th committee started behaving like an arm of law enforcement, including by, as you put it, establishing this Star Chamber proceeding, it no longer can rely on the separation of powers argument. And the Justice Department can't either, because they're working hand in glove. If the Justice Department wants to say, we can't make Congress do anything, then you should have said to Congress, we can't use this material because it's not complete. And if their position is that they're a separate entity, did they serve a subpoena on Congress? Now, that would have been an interesting separation of powers argument.